my Week of the Smurfs in honor of the new movie, I'm doing a timeline of Smurf characters from 1958 until the present. For my timeline, I'm mainly going to focus on the introduction of notable characters throughout Smurf history. So if you're looking for a biography of, say, Arrow Smurf, you have come to the wrong place. So without further ado, let's get started. The Smurfs were first introduced as side characters in the 1958 Johann and Pee Wee comic. At this point, the only named Smurf was Papa Smurf, then referred to as Grand Schtroumpf, which is his French name. This continues until 1959 when Smurf Napper was released, which featured the debut appearances of Gargamel and Azrael. It also featured an early, quite different-looking version of Brainy, who just didn't have any glasses, named Schtroumpf Moralisateur. Moralisateur is pretty much French for sanctimonious Smurf, quite fitting due to the character's morally superior, condescending attitude. As for the Brainy we all know and love, I guess, the glasses would be added in 1961, along with a name change to Schtroumpf à lunettes, which translates to Smurf with glasses. How clever. We also got to meet Dopey Smurf in 1959, who often appears in the comics. 1960 saw the introduction of Greedy and Snappy, which shocked me a lot, because for some reason I always thought Snappy was created specifically for the 1980s show. In a way, 1960 also marked Scratchy's official intro. Even though his origin stories featured in the Black Smurfs back in 1959, renamed Purple Smurfs in the cartoons for obvious reasons, this is the first time he's given a name. In 1961, we get introduced to Chef Smurf. This is important because he's necessary in order for the Smurfs to eat food. At least in all the universes outside of the 80s series where Grady makes all the food. 1962 saw the creation of notables like Vanity, Farmer, Handy, Jokey, Lazy, and Harmony. Sometime around 1965, we get the introduction of Hefty Smurf. I say sometime around because Hefty technically makes his comic debut with King Smurf comic in 1965, but he appears in the 1961 cartoon episode The Smurf and the Dragon, which, due to its appearance in the Smurf movie of 1965, tells us it was released at least by then. In 1966, we're introduced to the first female character of the entire series, the iconic Smurfette, who at least in my opinion was definitely worth the wait. We also get Poet, but mostly Smurfette. No offense to Poet though, because he's pretty chill. Somewhere around this time, Painter appears in the cartoon series, but I can find no official release date for his first appearance. However, I do know that's before 1967, because that's when the last episode aired. Now we're on to the 70s. Dreamy is technically mentioned in the aforementioned 1970 comic Astro Smurf, but he doesn't appear until the 80s series. In 1973, though, we get our first new Smurf appearance of the decade, Timber Smurf. Then in 1975, we're treated to our first Smurfs animated movie. I mean, sure, we have the movie that came out in 1965, but that legit was just a bunch of episodes from the 60s series repackaged. Unfortunately, at this point, we don't get any new significant Smurfs, aside from a few random ones that only appear in this movie. Although I do have a soft spot for Festive Smurf. I don't remember having a name in the movie, but he does according to Wikipedia, and is loved for throwing little parties. In 1976, we get introduced to Big Mouth, in the comic that would later be adapted into the Soup à la Smurf episode of the 80s series, which is a fitting introduction to his character IMO. Now we get to the 80s. The 80s cartoon is like my favorite thing ever. The first episode gives us our first real introduction to Dreamy Smurf in 1981. This is also the first appearance of Clumsy in Smurf media, who has certainly gone on to become one of the most iconic Smurfs ever. Season 1 also gives us Clockwork Smurf, King Gerard, and Hogatha, who is a common villain in the 80s show. We also get the first appearance of Balthazar, Gargamel's uncle/godfather. He's referred to as both. And technically, at the time, uncles often were godfathers, but it's kind of odd to refer to someone as both at different times. While not the most major of characters, I'm bringing him up because as a person who possessed the formula that Gargamel steals, allowing him to turn Smurfs into gold, he's undoubtedly important to canon. Or maybe he isn't, since occasionally it's implied that Gargamel had the formula all along. Did I mention that there are some issues with consistency? In 1982, Season 2 introduces us to Scaredy, who's a recurring character for the remainder of the show's run. 1983 gave us Chlorhydrus, another common villain, whose defining characteristic is that she hates love, and therefore hates Smurfs, I guess. Then, later that year, we got Baby Smurf and his powerful magic, as well as Natural Smurf, who becomes very prominent later on. Specifically his Smurfling, so let's not get too ahead of ourselves. In 1984, we meet the Wartmongers, who are the main Smurf-sized villains. We also meet Minor Smurf, who I did not remember being introduced so late in the series' run. He has such a defining presence. I legit just can't believe he hadn't appeared in any other Smurf media onto this point. Then, in 1985, came the first appearance of Puffy and the Smurflings, specifically Slouchy and Sessette, joining Nat, who first appeared in 1983, and Snappy, who apparently existed since the 60s. I still can't get over that. Many people consider this the moment that the show jumped the shark, but I personally don't understand that viewpoint. Admittedly, this is likely because the Smurflings were the main reason I got hooked on the show in the first place. They're just so cute. Unpopular opinion, I know, but I just can't help myself. In 1986, we get the next Smurf movie, Smurf Quest, which introduces us to Grandpa Smurf. We also get introduced to Scruple, Gargamel's apprentice in the 1980s show. In 1987, we get introduced to the enigma known as Wild Smurf, who was raised by squirrels. 1988 introduces us to Nanny Smurf and Smoogle, a little pink fluffy thing, both of whom were trapped inside an evil castle. Nanny subsequently appears in only 4 episodes at all, in only 1 comic ever, which is super weird considering how significant her appearance is to the 80s series. Then we get to 1989, the time travel season, where not only does nobody get introduced, but nearly every Smurf gets removed. I mean, technically there were new characters, but none of them are Smurfs, and they only appear once or twice. After this point, we don't get any new or significant characters until 2011, when the first movie came out and we get Gutsy Smurf and Narrator Smurf. Sure, there are some other Smurfs introduced as well. Pedigree Smurf, anyone? But none are all that significant. In 2013's dreaded Smurfs 2, we then meet Vexy and Hackus. In Smurfs in the Lost Village from 2017, the female Smurfs of the Grove are introduced. I'm not going to list all of them because that would take far too long, but Willow, Lily, Storm, and Blossom are the most significant. In 2019, Smurf Begonia is introduced in the comics, which is relevant due to her presence in the 2021 series. From there, we don't get any new or significant characters until 2021 in the form of the Smurf band that has Glammy, Rocky, and Smurf Meteorite. Although they don't speak very often, I felt their numerous appearances warranted them a mention. In 2022, we met Leaf the Fairy. Then in 2024, Gargamel's niece and nephew in this universe, Rowena and Dwayne, entered the fold. And then finally, in July 2025, we'll have the pleasure of meeting No Name Smurf, Ken, and Moxie, as well as Gargamel's brother, Rosamel, and a host of other new and exciting characters in the upcoming Smurf movie.